So thank you to all of you here joining in the Huxley Lecture Theatre in London today, and thank you to all of you who are joining remotely across the world. It's very much appreciated. Tonight we are going to have several talks from our teams at ZSL ahead of the 194th Annual General Meeting at 7 p.m. We have two fascinating talks tonight. We have one from Gary Ward, who is the ZSL creator of Birds, and Dave Clarke, ZSL's section manager for Herpetology. Before I introduce the first speaker, I just have a few little bits of housekeeping. Apologies, it's a bit like being back at school. So if you could please just bear this in mind. If you are joining me in the Huxley this evening, please do turn your phones to silent. You do not want them going off, trust me. If you are in the Huxley as well, you can put your hand up if you have questions, because there will be time to ask Dave and Clarke any of your questions that you have. If you are remotely at home, you can also ask questions. At the bottom of your screen, there is a little speech bubble, that is Q&A. Please do put them in there, and then Eleanor, who is also in the AV box, will wave at me and I can put your questions forward. If you were in the Huxley, we are not expecting any animal drills or fire drills, which means if you hear something, please follow us and listen to what we're saying. The exit point is at the front of the zoo, sorry, the front of the Huxley and to the left, and the fire meeting point is just at the front. If you are at home, you can create your own emergency instructions. You're safe to do so. I know. Finally, if you are remote and you are having any technical issues, please do let us know. One of our team is up there managing any issues that you have, and we'll sort that out. So now I've taken you to school. We are delighted to be able to welcome Curator of Birds, Gary Ward, to talk to you about the work to protect extinct in the wild species at our conservation zoos, London and Whipsnade.
Okay, well, hello everybody. My name is Gary Ward, and I am the Curator of Birds here at ZSL. And so I'm going to talk to you tonight about some of our zoo-based conservation work that we've been doing, and of course it's much more than what I'm going to explain to you tonight. But what I'm going to talk about is our involvement in some extinct in the wild species. We have ZSL has an extinct in the wild initiative at the moment, which you may know about, but if you want to know more, please ask. And part of that is obviously, you know, looking to see if we can restore some of these extinct in the wild species back out into the wild. So there's a total of 5 officially recognized extinct in the wild bird species. And we've been working with 2 species, the Socorro dove, which we hold here in the collection, and the Guam kingfisher, or seahat, which we don't have here in London Zoo, but they are held in North American zoos. So let's start with the Socorro dove. So the Socorro dove is endemic to the island of Socorro, which is off the west coast of Mexico. So it's a Mexican species. And it became extinct in the wild sometime in the mid-1970s. And this photograph here is one of the only photographs that we have of a Socorro dove in the wild. So and quite randomly actually, the captive population of Socorro doves was established way back in 1925 by the California Academy of Sciences, and they brought 17 birds into captivity. Now that wasn't because they thought the species was threatened or was declining. They just brought them into captivity for avicultural interest. And also the following year, 4 birds were sent here to the UK. And then in the early 90s, a European stud book was established for the species. And they looked at the birds that remained in North America, in North American collections, and they were all found to be hybridized with mourning birds. So today, the whole global population of Socorro doves stem from those 4 individuals that were sent to the UK in around about 1926. So London Zoo has been keeping the species since 1995. And this year, funnily enough, we've had our record breeding season with the species, having reared 6 chicks from our breeding pair, which is held in the Blackburn Pavilion. And of those 6 chicks, 2 of them are females, which are really precious because out of all the Socorro doves left in the world, which is currently 167, less than, there's double the amount of males than there is females. And of course, that leaves the population in quite a precarious state. So earlier this year, we funded a trip to Mexico to establish our relationship with the Socorro Dove project and meet with current partners that are working to see the bird return back to this island of Socorro. So a key partner is Inacol, and this gentleman here is Juan Canicchio, Mexican scientist. Inacol is the government-funded ecology institute in Mexico, and so Juan works for them. There's also Islands Endemic Foundation, Frankfurt Zoo, who actually hold the stud book for the Socorro Dove. African Safari, which is a zoo in Mexico, which is a key partner for us in holding Socorro doves in their collection currently. And all this work is now through our connections with the IUCN Conservation Transportation Specialist Group that's supported by them also. So Inacol has been doing, for over many years, doing a lot of island restoration work on Socorro Island. And as you can see here, all this erosion that's happening here was caused by overgrazing sheep. So sheep were introduced onto the island. They overgrazed the island, stopped the regeneration of the vegetation of the forest and the endemic plant species, and probably had a major impact in the extinction of the Socorro dove. So this is what it looks like today after sheep have been eradicated some years ago. The vegetation is regenerating, although a lot of this vegetation is of course invasive plant species. But you can see in here, for example, in some of these gullies, there's still quite large endemic trees and large shrubs, which we feel creates a good opportunity and a good habitat remaining for us to be able to see Socorro doves back out into the wild. So there's all this island restoration works, not just getting the island ready for Socorro doves, but also helps to safeguard the future of the other endemic bird species on the island, including the endangered Socorro parakeet and the critically endangered Socorro mockingbird. Back in 2011, aviaries were actually built on the island in preparation to receive Socorro doves. But here in 2023, those aviaries have never received birds. So there needs to be some more emphasis to push forward and start working on getting the birds back out onto the island, because everything is ready and in place. So a lot of research is obviously still ongoing and continuing to be ongoing. This is Alejandro, who's a Mexican vet who's currently doing a PhD looking at the habitat viability to support Socorro doves on the island. And there's a lot of restoration work and propagating endemic plant species and planting them back out on the island as well. African Safari, I mentioned earlier, this is the safari park in Pueblo in Mexico. So this is quite a large safari park, and they have a lot of history with native species recovery, and they have this fantastic off-show bird breeding center where they're breeding Socorro doves. Now, these Socorro doves that they have, they originated from birds from here, the UK population, which was sent out via North America into Mexico back in 2011. They currently have 30 birds in their facility, and they also have these amazing big aviaries. And if you look closely, there's a Socorro dove there on the ground, and there's a Socorro dove in the nest. There's actually 3 pairs of Socorro dove in these large big aviaries. And that's something that we in Europe can't actually do. We can't keep 3 pairs of Socorro doves together because they fight. Funnily enough, in Mexico, for some reason, they're able to do it. So that's really interesting. And these large aviaries will really condition those birds and make them fit and allow us to have the most healthiest birds we can for eventual release back out onto the island. And African Safari are an absolute key partner. They're really supportive. They're looking to helping us with hosting conservation planning workshops that we're planning, and also expanding their facilities for Socorro doves. So in our trip in March, we went out there. We also visited the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, the National Commission for Natural Protected Areas, and the General Directorate of Wildlife. These are 2 government agencies that we really need to engage with to allow us to get all the permits to allow birds to be released back out into the island. And one of the things that we're pushing for is for the Socorro dove to be a species of conservation priority in Mexico, because even though it was extinct in the wild, it wasn't actually on that list. So we engage with them, and they're very supportive, and those kind of negotiations and work through our Mexican partners is ongoing. Another key partner is the Mexican Navy, and the reason that they're involved is because they actually have a base on Socorro. So there's no getting onto Socorro Island unless the Mexican Navy takes you there and gives you permission to go. But they've always been really supportive, and it was an amazing experience going and meeting the Mexican Navy. And this gentleman here is actually the Chief of Staff, so he's really senior within the Mexican Navy. And they've now dedicated 3 senior officers to support this corridor restoration program. They've offered to fly birds out onto the island when we're ready to send birds there, because alternatively it takes 36 hours by boat to get to the island. So they're absolute key partners and have been massively supportive. So the next steps is in 2004, we're going to attempt to have a conservation translocation specialist group-led workshop with full stakeholder involvement, where we can sit around and develop all the plans and different alternatives of getting the birds back out into the island. We need to really improve the demographics and increase the size of the captive population. That means more space. So it means more aviaries so that we can grow the population, because the population currently isn't big enough to sustain harvesting from that captive population to put the birds back out into the wild. We also need to secure funding for the ongoing island restoration work and the overall species recovery. Releasing birds back out into the wild with any of these reintroductions is very, very costly. And so hopefully by 2030, we hope to see some corridors back out on the island. But that will probably be ongoing work and be conservation dependent for many decades to come once we even get them out. So quickly moving on to the SEAC, or the Guam kingfisher. So Guam, the species is endemic to Guam, which is in the Western Pacific. It was extinct in the wild by 1988 due to the introduction into Guam of brown tree snakes, which happened during World War II. They came onto the island via military cargo. So this species of snake is a specialist bird predator, a nest predator. They climb in the trees, and all the native bird fauna endemic bird fauna in Guam didn't have any natural defenses against this species. So a lot of the species did go extinct, and the Guam kingfisher was one of those. Thankfully, towards the end of its decline, 29 birds were brought into captivity through initiative through our colleagues in North American zoos. And today we have a population of 113 birds currently, all in North American zoos, and there's 2 or 3 males actually in aviaries in Guam as well. Oh, and there's a picture of one in captivity. And so how is ZSL involved in this one? Well, we don't have the species in London Zoo at all, but through our colleagues, particularly John Ewan in the Institute of Zoology and his connection with the Conservation Translocation Specialist Group, they were approached to do a workshop to see how they can reinstate and reinvigorate the recovery program of Guam kingfisher. And Amanda Trusk, also from Institute of Zoology, was then brought on and to do a lot of the science and the research and lead that head. And there's many others as well. I can't name them all, from Institute of Zoology and other partners around the world that have got to the point where we are today. And so in 2018, ZSL was contracted by the Guam Department of Natural Resources to lead the recovery planning for the SEAC. The reality is there's still brown tree snakes on Guam. And even though there's lots of research going on to control them, we can't put Guam kingfishers back on Guam. So we have to look elsewhere. So a lot of islands were assessed, a total of 5 very large islands and 2 smaller islands were assessed. And the plan is at this stage to release birds onto Palmyra Atoll to establish a free living population. And this is obviously going to be an assisted colonization. Huge amounts of research has gone into this because we're going to release a species, introduce species into another island that doesn't have it. So a lot of assessments have been done in terms of the impact of the ecology that Guam kingfishers would have on there. And basically, it's all looking quite promising that they wouldn't have any impact that would drive the extinction of another species. So that's looking good. And a lot of preparation and research has been gone into that. So Palmyra Atoll is basically in the middle of the Pacific. And this is Guam here, so it's 6,000 kilometers from Guam, so way out of its natural range. So quite an innovative and bold decision to release birds onto this island. And we are hoping that by releasing birds onto Palmyra Atoll, they'll allow the birds to then learn to live in the wild again. They'll be supplementary fed and closely monitored. We think that we can have 30 pairs on Palmyra Atoll. And birds from Palmyra Atoll will be the best candidates to be translocated to other larger islands once that's deemed suitable, we've selected the right ones, and then eventual release back onto Guam if in the future we can control the brown tree snake successfully. So it's an absolute paradise, Palmyra Atoll, and we think that the Guam kingfisher will do very well there. There's quite a large forest, quite a high forest, but of course they will be subject to things like cyclones and stuff like that. So maintaining that captive population while this is all going on is going to be crucial as well. So activities in 2023 saw the construction of release aviaries on Palmyra Atoll and the completion of a quarantine hand rearing unit at Sedgwick County Zoo in the States. And then in June this year, we attempted some hand rearing of Guam kingfishers, and the hand rearing was led by Erica Royer from the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. So she's got a lot of experience captive management of Guam kingfishers, of SEAC, but she needed somebody to help her. So we sent out Claire McSweeney, who's our team leader of birds from Whipsnade Zoo. And Claire's had a lot of experience rearing a range of different bird species. And so she went out there and helped with the rearing of birds this year. And the two of them basically locked themselves in this quarantine unit for about 6 weeks, rearing kingfishers. They received 17 eggs from zoos all across North America, from AZA zoos. Only 4 chicks hatched, which wasn't very satisfactory. It meant that we didn't have the minimum of 6 birds to allow us to go ahead and release birds onto the island. So those birds are going to be maintained in captivity. But what we did, the whole experience did teach us an awful lot. One of the things that we trialed was utilizing whistles so when we're feeding the chicks, so that they'll associate the whistles for food. So when those birds are eventually released onto Palmyra, the researchers and the field biologists on Palmyra can whistle them up, and they'll then come to supplementary feeding. Other things that we learned and we need to sort of review is the incubation parameters from the sending collections. So a lot of the eggs died during incubation. Of course, they were also flown or driven to Sedgwick County Zoo. So fertile eggs that have been incubated is quite a tricky thing to move them around the country. So all those techniques still need to be developed and refined so that we can actually have a better success rate in hatching those eggs moving forward. And we're committed to send somebody to help with the project, one of our keepers to help with the project in 2024. So in conclusion, both these projects, I think, are great examples of collaboration between the Institute of Zoology and the zoos and the zoo bird teams. There are always many international partners, far many than I can give credit to in a quick presentation like this. And then, in fact, the logos that I've got up there are only for those organizations that are involved in the SEAC recovery, not even the Curator work. Every species recovery is unique, and the challenges that we face are unique. And so we need to be innovative in the solutions to resolve that, such as these really bold and sometimes controversial assisted pollinizations, which is a way that we have to pursue to see the SEAC released into the world. And I think just to finish off, I think through strong internal and external collaboration, ZSL can really help to blaze the trail for the restoration of some of the world's most imperial bird species. And it's really exciting to be part of that, I have to say. So thank you very much, and I can take any questions.
Yes, hello everybody, welcome. And I'm really giving this talk on behalf of my colleague, Ben Tapley, who's the curator of Reptiles and Amphibians. I'm a bit of an imposter really, because you probably know me more as an invertebrate person, but I've been running the Herp team for the last year, particularly to help them deliver this new exhibit. So we've got The Secret Life of Reptiles and Amphibians, which you all must know is our newest building, which is not quite open yet in the center of the zoo. So reptiles and amphibians are an extremely diverse group of animals, both underappreciated and many are highly threatened. Reptiles are in ZSL's DNA. ZSL scientists were part of the team to discover the chytrid fungus was a driver of global amphibian declines, and this pathogen has caused precipitous population declines of more than 500 species of amphibian, and the recent extinction of dozens more. Amphibians and reptiles are core to our wildlife health work and a major strand of the Edge of Existence program. There's a bit of diversity of reptiles and amphibian species there. We also got a long track record of reptiles and amphibians with exhibits in the zoo. We opened the world's first reptile house, and the current building was opened in 1927, was designed by the legendary Joan Proctor. When we were designing the new exhibit, actually the code name was Proctor for the exhibit. At the time of opening, the building was state of the art, but the infrastructure was not well cared for. Furthermore, it's been much has changed regarding our knowledge on how best to keep reptiles and amphibians. And it was becoming increasingly challenging to maintain such an important group of animals in the current facility. Hence looking at a new structure to keep them in. And due to limitations with the current building, some of the most important species we're working with were not visible to the public due to suboptimal parameters for the public area, including the amazing mountain chicken frogs and our Ethiopian mountain ambers. So these are currently behind the scenes. But we take an evidence-based approach to animal care. We use field data, much of which we collect ourselves to inform management regimes of reptiles and amphibians. A great example of that is with our Lake Oku frogs, which are a critical edge species from Cameroon, which were bred for the first time at ZSL. So that's the lake that they're found in, and that's one of the first ever pictures of a tadpole of the Lake Oku frog. We undertake award-winning research to better understand the species we care for and improve husbandry, e.g. understanding how handling animals impact them, how their enclosures may be modified to ensure that the animals are thriving. This is some data on different colored backgrounds and seeing how normally the animals behave with them. And we're using this information to inform how we keep them in the new building. And much of our research is disseminated through peer-reviewed documents as well. So enclosure sizes, off-show breeding room space, and environment parameters provided by the herpetology team have informed how we go forward. Many enclosures are larger than existing enclosures, e.g. for the king cobra and the giant salamanders. We really weren't keeping them in enclosures that were suitable for modern welfare, so that's something that we're addressing in the new build. And we're also focusing on the water sources for aquatic amphibians, making sure we've got improved water quality, water sources, sumps, and the depth of tanks. And building new management systems for them, and particularly having very precise and more appropriate heating, cooling, and humidity control. And a lot of the provision for behavioral management has been made in consultation with our EAC team on site. So particularly for recall facilities for our crocodiles, as well as smaller reptiles, which is novel to ZSL. So we've actually been training our giant salamander as well to go into a tub with a marker so that it will choose to go into the tub that we can move it across to the new exhibit in, rather than just catching it up and stressing the animal more. So this is an earlier drawing of the reptile house itself. The footprints changed slightly since then, but the new exhibit in Berkeley Court has two zones, one of which contains all the breeding rooms and associated staff facilities, and the other, which is the sort of more lozenge-shaped bit, is the immersive exhibition space where animals can be viewed in naturalistic habitats. And all of these have been designed by the reptile and amphibian keepers and the horticulture team. So we need to recognize all the other parts of ZSL who have helped us, including the project team in getting this going, our facility staff, but a lot of it has been core due to our fantastic reptile and amphibian team. That's Unar Overson, who's one of our amphibian experts. And the selection of species was guided by ZSL species planning tool, and there's a focus on edge species and species threatened by the illegal wildlife trade. So one big thing about the exhibit going forward is that it is a conservation and research-based group of animals, rather than just a menagerie, which is what we've often done in the past. So the building will facilitate improved animal welfare, provide more stable environmental parameters, which will facilitate better breeding and research, and will allow our visitors to see the world-class research and conservation work of the reptile and amphibian team, and more widely the work ZSL undertakes with reptiles and amphibians, and improve staff facilities. One of the things I was amazed by when I went over to the reptile team is that the changing room is like a cupboard. So we're getting a proper sized changing room, which is very important to keeping people happy. So the amphibian collection will consist of 15 species, including the world's largest amphibian, the giant salamander, the world's largest aquatic frog, the Lake Titicaca frog, amazingly coloured mossy frogs, one of the world's most threatened amphibians, the mountain chicken frog, and our colony of critically endangered Lake Oku clawed frogs. Many of these species are edge species, so the green line on the left-hand side shows you edge species highlighted here, with active ZSL conservation and research projects, including the ZSL reptile and amphibian team. The new bill will house 15 reptile species, including the world's largest venomous snake, the king cobra, big-headed turtles and electric blue day geckos seized from the illegal wildlife trade, Chinese crocodile lizards, strikingly marked Manshan vipers, and panther chameleons, as well as underwater viewing for our crocodile. Again, many of these are edge species, highlighted by the green line, and active ZSL conservation and research projects. This is an example of a finished habitat for the mountain chicken frogs. In the photo, it looks like it's curved, but it's actually flat on the front. The space is 3 times the size of their previous enclosure and has more usable space and live plants, which had to be disinfected for biosecurity constraint. There's a picture of someone holding a plant there, and we were spraying them with a dilute bleach solution to make sure that they didn't have any pathogens on them, which is one thing that, amongst many, which has been a very detailed and time-consuming process to be able to move the animals into a biosecure space. But our visitors will also learn how to collect pathogen samples from mountain chickens and our wider work on amphibian disease. They'll learn what it's like to take a prolonged field trip focused on Vietnam's most threatened amphibians and how we race to describe species before they disappear forever. They will also learn how we concern the world's largest amphibian in China. They'll learn what it's like to study crocodiles in the field, and they'll also hear the calls of the purple frog, which is an edge species that is a focus on work in India's Western Ghats. And finally, they will contribute to the conservation of reptiles and amphibians generally through species like our own common toad. Our visitors will see the relevance of zoos to conservation and will learn how colleagues from ZSL, including those on the reptile and amphibian team, have helped in the wild. Not only will they see Chinese giant salamanders seized from the illegal wildlife trade and cared for at ZSL, they will learn how the team is working to conserve the species in China. They will also see not only what we do to provide homes for and breed big-headed turtles, also seized from the illegal wildlife trade. They'll learn how we've pioneered work with Vietnamese colleagues to release and monitor big-headed turtles seized from the illegal wildlife trade. 360 animals seized and relocated so far. I've actually gone through that really quickly. There's some pictures of the front of the exhibit. I know it's taunting everybody at the moment that there's still not access to the building itself, but we're getting closer by the minute. And it will be very exciting. And we've got lots of people excited just by our giant blue day gecko on the entrance door. Okay, thank you.